recommended as well.
And thank you very much for the kind introduction. It's really a pleasure for me to speak to you today, and having been invited there, coming from a very small European country, Austria, but as has been already said, I'm today speaking on behalf of the Consortium of European Building Control, an organization which actually has been founded in 1989, so it has already existed for quite a long time. And the purpose of this organization is to exchange information and experiences with regard to building control. And that is actually my topic today when I'm talking about construction in Europe. I would like to focus today on safety and quality of construction works, so of the products, of the results of such construction activities. And from my point of view, there are three drivers which we need to take into account when speaking about safety and quality of construction works. The one is the elements of which any construction works is consisting, and these are construction products. The quality of construction products, but not only the quality, also the question whether they fit to the purpose, whether they are installed correctly, is a very important point. The second driver would be simply the rules. The rules which are the technical requirements, but also the planning and zoning requirements. They set the framework, so to say, what should be done in order to ensure safety and quality. And finally, all this can only be done when there are people acting which are competent and which know what they are doing. Even the best construction products, the best rules do not lead to perfect buildings if the execution is bad. So, just to turn first to the construction products, they are regulated at European level. And you will see that is an important point because European level, national level, there's a need of communication which could also be a case of a problem. I'm just becoming aware that I'm perhaps speaking too fast, or is it all right? Okay. It's regulated at European level, and you certainly know the CE marking for construction products, which has reformed recently. 2 years ago, the Construction Products Regulation has come into force, replacing the old Construction Products Directive from '89, same year like the creation of CBC, by the way. And it has been introduced declaration of performance. That is a totally new approach which is different to the CE marking of any other products. For example, in the electric field, the rector has already left, but in the electric field, you have CE marking since a long time, but this is a new concept, the declaration of performances. With regard to the rules, the problem is they are still nationally regulated. So you have building regulations and nothing at European level except perhaps the Euro codes, if you a little bit think about the basic works requirement 1, mechanical resistance and stability. But basically, building regulations fall under the competence, under the responsibility of the member states. With regard to competences, we have a mixed situation. On the one hand, the qualification of designers, contractors, and the requirements for licenses and so on is regulated at national level, but we have already a sort of mutual recognition of acceptance rules and so on. I will elaborate a little bit later in more detail. Construction products. The declaration of performance, which has been, as I said, newly introduced, informs about essential characteristics of construction products. And the problem I see with regard to quality of construction works is that, different to the former construction products regulation, this declaration of performance is really just a list of performances and does not include any information about the use and the installation of these construction products. I always say it's a little bit like a blood test. If you are going to the doctor and having a blood test, you get results, but if nobody tells you whether you are healthy or sick, it does not help. It's just a statement of certain values. And the declaration of performance is nothing else. So the CE mark itself on the construction product does not tell you whether the construction product can be used for a certain purpose or not. You must know it yourself. And the only information you could receive is in the instructions which the manufacturers are obliged to send together with the product, to put on the market together with the product. That is an obligation coming from Article 11, paragraph 6 of the Construction Products Regulation. Just try to go on the market and ask a manufacturer whether he knows about Article 11, paragraph 6 and instructions. He probably won't know. So that is a communication gap we definitely have under the new Construction Products Directive. And coming now to quality, the problem is the users, the designers starting with, and the contractors, the professionals, they have to decide which construction product, according to the performances they are going to use. They have to read, so to say, the DOP. They have to check whether the product is fit for the intended use or not. Again, go to the next construction site, go to the next architectural bureau and ask the designers and ask them whether they know that they have to look at the DOP and that not every given product which has a CE mark would be fit for its intended use. That is, again, this information gap I can see there. We know since 1 year, when the European Court of Justice made the judgment against Germany in the case coming from 2013, that member states are not allowed to fill this information gap. Member states are no longer allowed to issue national approvals for CE-marked products in order to give information about, you have here a CE-marked product, you may use it there in this or that manner. This information used to be given in such national approvals, but they are no longer allowed. It's an obstacle to the market, obviously. But the reason is that the CE marking is not giving enough information. Competencies. On the one hand, we have education for craftsmen and secondary and post-secondary education. And I see a problem with the craftsmen. The education is very different from country to country. I just tell you, as an example, the dual educational system for professionals in Austria or in Germany, where you have an apprenticeship and in parallel still a teaching in schools. So the apprentices are also attending schools for 1 day a week, for example, in order to get theoretical knowledge and foundation, so to say, for the practical experience they are collecting in their apprenticeship. That is a system which you don't find in many other countries, or at least not in the same way. The situation is a little bit better with regard to secondary and especially post-secondary education at universities. There you have the Directive on Recognition of Professional Qualifications on the one hand, but especially the Bologna system, so now students can start their studies in one member state and go to another member state, and it's quite easy. But education is not everything. You also have, not in all member states, but in most of the member states, a system of licensing. So if you have studied architecture, if you have studied civil engineering, that does not yet mean that you may act as an architect and open your architect's cabinet. But there are big differences in the member states. There are, of course, provisions for mutual recognition at European level, services directive. So the architects from one country may also become operative in another country, but still we have big differences in the level of requirement with regard to the licensing. In Austria, for example, it is required for an architect to become architect, to have a cabinet, to have a certain number of years experience, but also to pass an examination. And the examination is quite severe before a board consisting of representatives from the Chamber of Engineers and Architects and from the regional governments. So it's quite a severe system. And finally, as regards the rules. The rules, you know, they consist of 2 or 3 elements actually. The 2 elements with regard to requirements are the zoning and planning requirements, and the second, the technical requirements, which need to be fulfilled by the construction products, by the construction works. And in order to check whether these requirements are indeed fulfilled, you have systems of building control. And that is the topic we are discussing today, actually. Building control, again, consists of 3 steps normally. You have building permits, you have inspections, and finally you have use permits or something similar. In Austria, for example, we don't have use permits any longer, but they are still in place in many member states. But also here, you have big differences in the member states. That is actually why the consortium of European building control is an interesting body, because it could also lead to an approximation of these systems slowly, but eventually perhaps due to the exchange of experiences we are providing there. I would, before elaborating a little bit more on the differences in the building control systems, I would like to point out one major point or difference in these systems. We are at the technical university, so I can make such a graphic. You have here the extent of building control. So that would mean no building control at all. That would mean the heaviest building control you can imagine. And on this axis, you have the qualification of actors. This would mean everybody can act as a contractor, designer, whatsoever, no requirements. And this would mean a very heavily regulated system. And you have, just symbolically, I could say, such a curve, you could say. If you have a highly regulated business registration, so the competence of the economic operators in the construction sector is very high, then you don't need to perform a lot of building control. On the other hand, if, like in UK, for example, you have a very low level of entry into the market, then, of course, you must perform ex post control. Then you must have a very efficient building control system. I give you one example which is really striking. Take a one-family house, residential building, small residential building. In Austria, you would not have any inspection on site and no use permit. In Iceland, you would have at least 20 inspections on site for the same building. So you see the big differences, and they are due to such a relationship. Going into a little bit more detail with regard to the different models, permits and inspections on site, you have actually permits possibly for 2 stages. The one is for zoning. The question, may such a building be built on this plot according to the zoning plan? And the second issue is the technical requirements. Are the technical requirements being fulfilled by the project which has been introduced for permission? You could roughly distinguish two models in Europe. The one model is that you have two permits, so one permit for the zoning and one permit for the technical issues. And the second model is that you have just one permit, including both at one, in one such permit. With regard to inspections on site, you can also distinguish two models, so to say. The one is that you have regular inspections on site, often several times at several stages, as I have explained, as an especially interesting case, Iceland, but it's in many countries that you come several times to a construction site. And the second model is that you have inspections only in special cases, or even no inspection at all. That Model A and B, of course, relates a little bit to what I've elaborated on qualification and so on. Also, with regard to the use permit, you can distinguish two models. The one is that you have a use permit, which is required after a final inspection. So you have a final inspection. Has everything been constructed according to the permit and according to the technical requirements? And the second is, no, you have no such permit, and normally you just have a sort of confirmation, I would even say a self-confirmation, where either the builder, the investor himself, is just confirming everything is according to the permit, or it is an independent third party from the private sector, for example, a designer or a contractor which has not been involved in the project, who is confirming this. You send this confirmation to the building authority and the case is settled. So these are the two principal possible distinctions. And finally, also with regard to the involvement of private third parties, so the private sector also playing a role in the building control, there you can distinguish two models. The one is that you have private experts. You have private experts in most systems, but they are only involved for specific control tasks, either on behalf of the builder, the investor, he has to care himself and ask for them, or on behalf of the authority. This authority asks, let's say, a contractor who is not involved in the construction project in question, and tells him, please check whether everything is all right. So this is one model. And there's another interesting second model, and that is that private building control bodies just replace the authority. So you have a choice to use the authority or to use a private body. In this case, of course, zoning permissions are always still issued by the authority. You can imagine that with regard to the permits, the two models, there you have to use the model where you have separated planning permits and technical construction permits, because only the technical part can be delegated totally to a private body. That would be the case in England, for example. Coming back to safety and quality of construction works and the drivers, so slowly approaching my conclusions. Now from another angle, from another perspective. It's the building authority which can ensure quality and safety in construction through a very good and intensive control. But we have also one other driver I have not yet mentioned so far, and these are insurances. Also, insurances have an interest in quality and safety, especially quality of construction, because if there are building damages, they have to pay. they don't want to pay, so they insure only if you have a building control which is assuring that nothing happens. And finally, you have the competencies again, which appear always. And if you look at this diagram, you could say these are issues of control. In the one case, it's public control. In the other case, it's private control. And here on this side, you have education. So you can bargain now, or balance, find a balance between these two elements, education on the one hand and control there. If you have more education, you need less control. If you have more control, you need less education. But you can also bargain here. I do it more publicly through authorities, or I do it more privately through private building control bodies. And looking at the European field, you could say, here again, these three corners of the triangle, public control, private control, education, you would find UK, but England, where there is not one UK, there are several UKs, so that is England. There you have very little requirements with regard to education. And you have, so everything control, more or less, but more towards private control than towards public control. Then you have Austria. We have nearly no private control, and I mean now not the third party which is acting on behalf of the authority, but the real private control, where everything is delegated to a building control body which is authorized or something like this, but private. And we rely very much on education, but still we have some control. We have building permits, but we don't nearly have inspections. A little bit similar, but perhaps a little bit more involvement of the public control still in Germany, with an element of third parties, private third parties involved, but on behalf of the authority. You have another part of the UK, Scotland, which is on this peak of the triangle, because they don't apply the English system with the private control bodies. They have just the state control and not so much requirements on education either. And then you have France. France, which has a nearly fully insurance-based system, where there is an obligatory liability insurance of all economic operators, designers and contractors. And of course, the insurances of these, giving these liability insurances require some private building control. Bureau Veritas, for example, Socotec. And you could choose not to have it, but then your prime is so high that you recalculate and then you will go for the private control. Yeah. Conclusions. Perhaps first back to the CBC, Consortium of European Building Control. It consists presently of 35 members coming from 23 countries, authorities and private organizations. Socotec, for example, is a member also of CBC, or SECO, which is a similar body in Belgium. NHBC, the National House Building Council in England, which is an authorized, approved inspector in England, so a private body is also a member. And the purpose is to share knowledge and experiences and exchange information. Trends and tendencies. What could be the developments in future? With regard to construction products, we need to take into account and to deal with it in an appropriate way that the CE marking with the concept of the DOP, Declaration of Performances, shifts more responsibility to the designers and users. The designers and users are not yet entirely aware of this fact, but they have now more responsibility as regards construction products and their installation and use. With regard to the competencies, the traditional national systems, I've explained the differences, will fade. There will be an approximation due to the Services Directive, due to the, still, even when we have crises, more and more, let's say, growing internal market, the competencies will go to the liberal side. That is my prediction, I would say. So for example, also in Austria, where we have a very strong system on licensing, I'm sure we will have to open it up sooner or later. So we will in future probably not be able to rely as much on competencies as we can do today. With regard to the rules, I suppose the rules are going to be more and more performance-based. That would also fit to the concept of declaration of performances. So you have information of construction products, and you have performance requirements for the construction works. Altogether, that would mean that building control will become more important, but it will also be necessary that building control is becoming more professional. And in which way it should become more professional, that is a matter of discussion. And perhaps we can report on this in 5 years or something like this when we know more. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Rainer. Thank you for a wonderful, stay please here a bit, for a wonderful ability to put the issues into perspective. We have a chance to give one quick question from the audience, if there is such, and there is such. Please, can we bring them? Yes, we can.
I need my
translation device, yeah. Or maybe it will be in English. There is a hope.
We'll see.
Okay.
In English? Okay, perfect.
Thank you for the nice presentation. I'm Marit Stram from construction industry. And if you could return to the slide where you had this triangle.
Yeah.
Could you comment on the tendencies in future? Would there be some common tendencies for the control to move to private control or public control? Yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
On what did you mean? Payment? What?
If you could comment on the tendencies globally for Europe, what would be where this control would shift?
Yeah. So, from my point of view, the control will shift a little bit more to the private control, but also the public control will be enforced using, again, more third-party control. It will, of course, lead to higher costs for building control, I suppose, at least in some countries. There are, I did not mention this financial aspect, but there are also important differences in the cost of control. You can imagine that in countries like Iceland, I've mentioned, with a 20 or 21 inspections on site, even by a small building, that costs money. If you don't perform any control, it costs less money. So if you have to do more control, building control is going to be more expensive. By the way, in Austria, we have probably the cheapest building control system, so I would say it's state subsidized in a way, because we are just paying a couple of €100 even for larger projects, for the building permit and so on. But yes, it will. The tendencies I've presented in my last slide will certainly lead to more cost also for the building control.
Thank you very much. If we are using this wonderful chance, a quick question, maybe one more. Yes, there is at the row previous to last. Marathon.
Thank you for your presentation. And just to give my background, my name is Juris Janterans, and I'm a structural engineer with 45 years experience in construction, code writing, inspections, safety, etc. And my question is, to what extent, if any, the future EC-US trade agreement will affect your prediction
Yeah, of course, the TTIP will have an impact on the construction products, but not on the building control and construction works. So the CE marking, the construction products, the declaration of performances for construction products, that will be an issue for TTIP. I give you an example. We have in Europe also American, US testing laboratories. For example, United Laboratories has an office in Frankfurt and in other places in Europe, and the purpose of this UL laboratories having their company also here, or subsidies also here in Europe, is to ensure that European construction products can be tested according to American standards in Europe before they are going to be exported there, and on the other hand, that the American manufacturers of construction products know exactly what to do when they would like to export construction products to Europe, because they still need to apply the regulations in place, the European products according to the American standards, the American products according to the European standards. There was even a big battle for, there is one European technical approval or now assessment guideline for metal anchors. And there was a battle which was quite severe 15 years ago when this guideline came out for CE marking, because the American companies did not want to apply this and to get European technical approvals at this time, but they were forced to do it finally. This will probably be eliminated through such a TTIP, unless there will be some clause excluding construction, but I'm not aware of such a clause for the moment.
Thank you, Rainer. Thank you very much. I believe you're going to have a very busy time during the coffee break, because I feel that tons of questions in the audience. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.